Hi, and welcome to Musicians Hangout with your host, Crash Fistfight from Hated Noise and Fatal Butterfly, and Maxine Maxwell from the Maxwells.
Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. It's so great to be back on this stormy night in Washington. Oh my goodness gracious.
Yesterday was the fall, what was it, the fall solstice, and then literally today was like fall weather.
Yeah, we celebrated the equinox yesterday by, like doing some smudging, and I dressed in like fall colors. It was really awesome and to welcome a new season. Oh, I guess my friend Crash has frozen. So back to that stormy night. We are experiencing some crazy weather here in Washington, and I have some crazy wind. Crash has some crazy wind. Our power is flickering, and we're just going to try to get through this all together. If we, for any reason, cut out, we will make sure to reschedule our awesome guest at another time. But until then, I'm going to keep this place rolling and go over our mission statement and introduce our awesome guest for tonight. So Musicians Hangout mission statement is to be part of a revolution, to create friendships with other artists, and build a community network to save music. So we welcome Lillian Blair of the Vera Project. Hello, Lillian.
Hello.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a producer and engineer in the Seattle, Washington area. And what that means is that I work with artists to help guide them through the recording process. And I get to handle all of the fun technical aspects that I like geeking out over. And together we work to create music to send out into the world.
That is so freaking awesome. And I love that you are in the Seattle area. I can't wait to meet you in person someday soon. I'm close to Seattle. I'm on the peninsula. I'm in Sequim. So our paths are bound to cross eventually. I wanted to ask when you started your recording career.
Well, I got my first taste back in high school. We had a recording class, and back then, I was sort of part of the house band that all the other students got to record on, but it really sort of stuck with me. So a few years later, I ended up self-recording an EP of myself playing the piano. And a few more years later, I decided this was something that I really loved, and so I attended the recording program at Shoreline Community College.
Oh, nice.
And interned at London Bridge Studios and have been doing it ever since.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. All right, let's see. We've got Angie in the house. She says, wind is crazy. Y'all rock, and I want to drum. I want the drum set in Lillian Blair's picture. Yeah, I was thinking that too, Angie. Oh my gosh, that is so freaking awesome.
I honestly don't remember whose kit that is, but it is representative of like the approach I take to recording, especially drums. More microphones, the better.
Do you have a kit in the studio, or do drummers?
We have a couple kits. I tend to prefer drummers to bring their own kit just because they're more familiar with the instrument.
Yeah. Well, and as a percussionist myself, I do prefer to have my kit. So I totally get it. Very cool. Very cool. Hey, Tom says, hey, ladies, hope all is well. Stay safe. By the way, I would kill for that weather here in California. Haha. I'm sure. Yeah, it's pretty hot down there in California. Goodness. So, Lillian, tell me a little bit about a project that you've done recently.
Well, the most recent project that I've worked on, we just finished recording yesterday. It's a pagan folk record with a band called Serpent's Temple. We went to Mysterious Red X in Soto, which is a nice little like mid-tier studio stuck in some warehouse. And over 2 days, we did 8 songs, and I'm really happy with how they all turned out. It was interesting because it's different from like a standard rock setup, which I'm used to. For example, for instance, we had one drum instead of a whole kit of drums. So, but I was able to mic both heads of the drum because the performer played on both heads. So that opens up a lot of interesting possibilities later on when I get to the mixing, because I can choose to, say, pan it out so that there's play back and forth in the stereo field based on our drumming. The other real standout element of that session is that one of the performers actually sort of, because it's a pagan band, she sets up an altar, she sort of conjures the energies and really keeps everything sort of focused in that way, and she does so by dancing. So she, for her part in the recording, she donned some dancing bells and actually danced along to the record, and we got that to add a
That
percussion.
sounds so beautiful.
It does sound really good.
Oh, nice. What a cool experience that you get in the studio with musicians. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really an amazing thing to be a part of, to be able to help with all of these people's creative journeys and expressions, and really help them get to the point where they create something that they wouldn't necessarily have been able to do on their own. It really is about like cultivating that experience and what and that the musicians are after.
Yeah, I love that you honor that for musicians. That's great. Hey, we had a question over here in the chat about what do you charge for recording?
What's your budget?
Oh, so I guess
Look, it's the thing about recording engineers is that we're really stingy about letting out our rates. You may have noticed, and a lot of that is because we work on a sliding scale. If a band is coming, signed to a major label, they've got a 5-figure budget, we're probably going to charge a little bit more than if it's an indie band, saving a buck here and there to be able to like go into a studio.
That's cool. That's good to know. Thanks for sharing that. And good question over there in the chat. And we have Kelly Ray in the house also. Good evening, ladies. Love the fact that you have a passion for sound. Makes a huge difference in a producer and what you bring out in the mix. That sounds like a Maxwell video. I'll have to work with Lillian. I think this would be fun. I really like to. I like to explore working with other people, and
I have been dying to ask her questions.
Oh yes, please do. Welcome back, by the way, Crash. I kept it rolling for you.
Thank you. Sorry with the storm, internet problems.
It's gonna happen. We're gonna keep going.
So I've noticed that like vinyl has actually outsold CDs this year.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of amazing. And with that, I wanted to ask you, do you record digital or analog?
I record digitally. Studios do have tape machines, but like even Shoreline had a tape machine, but it wasn't functional. We weren't trained on it. The thing about recording a tape is that there's this mystique to it, especially because there are fewer and fewer engineers who actually possess the knowledge on how to be able to do it, since no one's learning how to do it. Certainly no one's learning how to edit doing it. You need to keep in mind when it comes to recording a tape that each reel at 30 inches per second can record 15 minutes of music. And these days, a reel of tape costs about $400. So you can really quickly balloon your budget if you want to record the tape. A lot of artists that do record the tape these days go through a hybrid approach where they run through the tape machine and go into Pro Tools. And so that gives you that tape sound, that gives you that visual of seeing like the meters on the tape machine go and knowing that you are going through that medium, but it still gives you the flexibility and the cost-saving features of going into digital.
Oh.
For my approach, I love the sound of tape, but I also like flexibility when I work with my sound, so I actually add that sound in when I'm doing a mix.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, hell yeah.
Ah,
What
I like
programs
that
do you use?
very cool.
Pardon?
What programs do you use?
I record with Pro Tools. It was what we were taught in school, and it's still sort of the industry standard. Every studio is going to have it. And as far as like sound processing, I use a lot of the Slate Digital plugins. I find that they're really flexible and have a great sound to them.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm learning a couple of programs, because I'm trying to learn some sound engineering, and I love talking to different sound engineers because everybody has a different program.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had mentioned, I'm not tech savvy, so any advice is always good advice.
Yeah. What programs are you working with?
Pro Tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pro Tools really excels when it comes to recording and editing audio. It's really great for mixing as well. It sort of falls short when it comes to MIDI and virtual instruments. It's a little bit more complicated than something like Ableton or Logic. But I stand by Pro Tools. I have no intention of changing programs.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Pro Tools.
So Angie is asking, can you talk about what plugins do for the recordings and the reason behind them? And she was reading my mind.
So plugins are additional pieces of software that you load up onto your audio track to process the audio. So these software that takes over the role of pieces of hardware that we use back in the analog days. So EQs, compressors, reverbs, tape saturators, anything that really manipulates the audio is these days found in what we call plugins. They're basically just extra pieces of software that you use. So they're really the core to mixing. When I approach mixing, I sort of start with getting a basic fader balance, but then I need to make sure everything works well together. So that's when I load up EQs and compressors to start manipulating the sound.
Right. Do you master also?
I do mastering. It's not, I consider it like semi-professional mastering. It's all digital. I don't charge as much as like dedicated mastering engineers, but there's a market for indie artists looking for more affordable mastering. So that's what I provide. Mastering is more of a different like mindset. Mixing sort of like getting all the elements balanced together, and mastering is focusing on the final product and polishing that up.
Right.
And it's a bit of a mysterious it's a mysterious process. I like to believe that mastering engineers enjoy playing up the mystique of it, because it really is something where you're going along and then all of a sudden it sounds like a real song, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's part of the creative process, working with each individual and full bands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get you. Cool.
Typically, you don't do your own mastering, though. I've often found artists are like, and we want me to do the mastering. It's actually more of a challenge to do your own mastering than it is to do somebody else's mastering.
Dude, I hear you. Yeah, it is. I don't do the mastering. My husband does that, but he devotes months to it because it's such a tedious process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The biggest benefit of going to a mastering engineer that's not your mixing engineer is that you get a fresh set of ears on the project. Even if you work quickly, you're going to be so familiar with what you've already done that you really start losing perspective. So that's why it's recommended that you go to a separate engineer. If you can afford to, you go to a dedicated mastering engineer who probably has a studio built around mastering equipment and can really get you that polish and finalization that'll help your songs translate across multiple systems and be competitive with other tracks that are coming out from other artists.
I guess I didn't
So
even think
Angie
of
has a question. Right. She wants to know what makes a good mix.
Whatever the artist is happy with.
Oh,
It comes down to what the artist wants. The artists they're the client, they're paying for it, and it's their art. We are
Do you ever
really just
suggest to them, like, well, maybe bring the keys down a little bit and
absolutely like it usually takes a few passes to get a mix right. I'll do my mixing, send it off to the artist. They'll say, something like that. Can you bring the keys down? Can you bring the vocals up? I don't like this reverb. Can you change this around? And then I'll go and I'll make their adjustments. The first pass is me being creative, because mixing in particular feels a bit like painting with sound. That's how I like to view it. But every pass after that, it's making it the way that the artist wants it.
that's awesome.
fair enough.
But I suppose for artists doing it themselves, to further answer Angie's question, a good mix is something where the elements are balanced. You can hear everything, and it sounds good on multiple listening devices. So it sounds good in your car. It sounds good over iPhone earbuds. Sounds good over iPhone speakers. Sounds good over your stereo and your mixing environment and your friend's car and your friend's stereo and as many different environments as you can test it on, especially when you're just getting started with mixing. Once you have it sounding, it's not going to sound the same, obviously, because every development sounds different. But as long as
yeah,
it sounds,
I've noticed that when my laptop's old, so it sounds kind of crappy, and then I go to my car and it sounds amazing, and then when I hook it up to the phone, maybe it'll be echoey, and then go in and adjust that. And I believe I don't do this, depending on the compressions, that you feed through on each device. Is that correct? I don't do the recording. My husband does, but I've watched him through the process, and I listen to it too. And if I hear odd things with my drums or my vocals, I voice that and he tweaks everything. Mm-hmm. So the compression matters depending on what you're listening through, right?
Right. Different listening devices will apply their own processes to what you're doing. And depending on the overall quality of the file that you're going through, that can actually affect how things sound. And oftentimes it's just a trial and error kind of process of making adjustments, bouncing things out, testing, writing down notes, going back and making more adjustments.
Do you have advice on how to record so that when it is compressed into a listening, like a live streaming platform such as Spotify or through iTunes, because sometimes the compressions get odd from the recording to that platform, and I'm not sure how to fix that.
I mean, platforms like Spotify and YouTube and Apple Music, they all apply their own normalization. So I believe Spotify's is minus 14 RMS. So That means that they have their average volume level at minus 14 decibels. So if you are, say, like really compressing everything to make it sound as loud as possible, like you would over a CD, it's going to get turned down, and it's actually going to sound. It's going to sound as loud as everything else.
Okay.
Ultimately, like personally, I haven't really run into issues with sort of that kind of file compression that you get. The thing to keep in mind is that when you compress audio to like an MP3, it rolls off the high end over 16 kilohertz.
Yeah.
So that takes away a lot of the brightness and a lot of the air of the sound. So if you are sort of listening to the differences, you will hear that like your MP3 sounds darker. But that's just the nature of the file format. So you keep that in mind in that you know that everything above 16 kilohertz is going to interact with like the processes that you're doing, especially when you get to something like master bus compression.
Okay.
But it's not going to be audible in the final product. So you don't want to like have that be where you're getting the majority of your symbol information, because that's just going to be low.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I mean, like that's not where the body of the symbol is anyway. So it's more just like a feel.
I get you there. Yeah. Sweet. Let's see. Where is your studio? Is it in Seattle?
Yeah. The Vera project is located in Seattle Center, right across from KEXP.
Oh, nice. Okay, I know where you're at now. Sweet. Oh, I love that.
We're an all ages DIY art space.
And cool. Do you have lessons through there too? Do you use the studio for other things?
We do. Our main draw, at least pre-COVID, was we had a 350 cap venue, and training and work opportunities for live audio in particular, which because we're all ages and like focused, that was really where a lot of young kids were able to get their first experience in audio and actually get to with the working engineers getting paid to run shows in venue with industry standard equipment. So they were able to then move on to work in other venues around town at really ages like unheard of in the industry. Like we had a member who was 19 get hired by the Showbox, and that's just never happens. But because years of experience working at Vera, he was able to land that job opportunity. So we do that. I teach a recording intensive workshop. We meet,
nice.
For 5 hours, 6 consecutive Sundays. We get 30 hours total of studio time.
Wow.
And that's really focused on taking students from like the beginning of the recording process through mastering and finishing up the recording.
Ooh.
So we start with, here's the studio, here's how you set everything up. Week 2, we bring in a band, and they get to set up a full studio setup. So not for them. It's basically, here's what I would use if I were recording this band for a project. Now you get to go set it up. So typically I'll put up like 16 microphones in a drum kit, and they get to put up 16 microphones in a drum kit. And then we walk through like coaching performances and interacting with the band and using the analog equipment, using the digital equipment, and we just sort of move through the recording process, and hopefully by the end of it, we have a nice overview of what goes into studio recording. I've gotten people who are interested in DIY recording, and so we talked a little bit, but I sort of view the program as an alternative to a more expensive recording program that takes more time, like Shoreline or Robert Lang, and it's really just about providing that experience because it's not a very common job to have, and it sort of has this difficult this barrier to entry if you really want to get into the point where you're putting all of those microphones up and working with established bands.
Wow.
And so the focus of that course is to provide the knowledge and the skills to be able to do that, but also the experience of doing something cool that you're not necessarily going to have the opportunity to do.
Wow.
And once COVID's over, I can start teaching again.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, what you've been doing because of the COVID restrictions. Have you gone online with this, or is it's mostly on hold?
Yeah, the studio workshop is on hold because so much of studio work is physical.
It's physical, yeah.
But I have been teaching an online mixing workshop. So
okay, that's cool.
More like with the studio workshop, we'd have like one day to go over mixing. And so this way I get to go a little bit more in depth to it. And for this workshop, it's sort of a mix along kind of thing. So I'll take a song, go through how I would mix it, doing different approaches because there are different ways that people tackle a mix and explain different processes and give the students a chance to experiment on their own. And we have students will post their own mixes, and we'll critique based on what we hear, and it runs for there are 3 classes for us, so we do a different mix every day, and I try to use different style music. So I'll have my big studio recording that I did from one of my studio classes, and then I'll have a DIY recording that one of my artists made. So we'll get to experiment with that kind of recording where you don't necessarily have unlimited microphones to put up, and are really working with a more limited approach, like you would if you're just starting out in a DIY recording sense. Yeah. And while I didn't have an electronic song the last time I ran it, this current time I do want to incorporate that just because a lot of people are drifting towards electronic music, and I'm seeing that they want that kind of mixing guidance. And it's while the overall knowledge of how everything works is going to be the same, whether or not you're doing rock or EDM or whatever, having that as like an example, I think it's going to be really beneficial. So that's something that I'm going to be introducing with this next run of the mixing course.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sure, seriously, I'm going to take these classes.
What platform do you use when you are doing your mixing classes? Is it YouTube or Zoom?
We use Zoom.
Okay, cool.
And registration is currently open for the next class if you want to take it.
Oh, hear that, everybody?
Definitely.
Where can viewers and where can we go to register for a class?
There should be a link on the Vera Project's website.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull it up and put it into the chat.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, put it in there. And we do have a question for you from the chat from Angie.
Uh-huh.
Do you have any advice for women entering engineering who have been marginalized in this field?
I don't know. There was a study that was conducted a few years ago that said that 2% of producers are female. So it's very disproportionately male centered profession.
Dominant.
And there's not really full. There's a lot of different opinions as to why that is. Some people say that it's because it takes a long time to establish a career, and then, if you start when you're 20, by the time you're 30, you want to have a family, and so you sort of drop out of it. I'm more on the side of, because people don't see producers and engineers, they think of women as being producers and engineers, and they're likely to work with women being producers and engineers. I personally haven't experienced too much overt sexism, but I'm sure there's a lot of subtleties that you pick up on
Oh, yeah.
in a male-dominated space. Advice for women trying to become an engineer: stick with it. You face 1,000 rejections before you get a yes, and you're probably not going to get paid a lot for ever. And
so it's just like being a musician then.
It's
in any job in the music industry faces those same challenges.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you're passionate about and you really just take to the process and love playing around with audio equipment and love putting together different sounds and experimenting and, as I said before, painting with sound, it comes down to sticking with it and making friends. I found that I don't get work if I just go and talk to an artist and hand them my business card, but I do get work if I maintain relationships and really make sure that the artist knows that I care about them. And I don't do that cynically or with an ulterior motive. To me, making music with people it's my favorite thing in the world. It's the greatest level of connection that I've found I've been able to have with other people. And so, that's what I want. That's why I made it my job, is because that's the only way that I can actually do it the way that I want to do it, to the level that I want to do it. And I've made friends with musicians and have continued these friendships for years. And while I may have initiated those friendships because I want to work with them, I'm not still friends with them because I want to work with them. I'm friends with them because I'm friends with them. And then
you click.
That then, translates into a great working relationship because we already know each other. We already have this rapport, and that's really where things start to blossom. If you think about it, when you're a producer especially, but even when you're an engineer, you sort of come in as an extra member of the band. You communicate, people need to trust you, and so being able to have that friendly rapport really is above all else, like the make or break of a good recording session. And so I found that it helps to approach everything with that in mind and really focus on building those relationships and just hope that they then translate into working together.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you network mostly at live shows, online, at events, at the Seattle Center?
I mean, as far as reaching out to artists, I tend to go to as many shows as possible. And this is all pre-COVID.
Oh yeah, I know. We talk a lot pre-COVID, the good old days.
Yeah.
I miss pre-COVID.
Oh yeah, life was better. But yeah, so I'll go out and I'll talk to bands, and I'll tend to, when I find a band that I like, I'll go and see them as often as I can, because that's how you can guarantee you're in the same room with someone that you wouldn't necessarily be in the same room with. Like, I like getting coffee with people, so I'll ask artists out for coffee a lot.
I love coffee. Let's do that.
Guilty.
You can do that.
Yeah. I don't do live audio, so I don't necessarily, work directly with artists that way, but I do go out and I do talk to artists, do give them my business card, but I sort of figure it's up to me to maintain those relationships and to build them. Whether or not that's me being a woman in the industry, to circle back to that conversation, or if that's just like the nature of the job.
Of the business. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
I feel like it would be incredibly hard to do live acts than it would be a studio setting, just because, you're miking and unmiking and miking and unmiking and miking and unmiking.
Yeah.
And
live engineers and studio
everything to a degree.
No, totally. Live engineers and studio engineers are completely different. Live engineers, it's all about efficiency and speed and getting things done because they're constantly racing against the clock.
Makes sense.
I mean, if you think about it, like they're scheduled for a 15-minute changeover and the last artist
Wait, 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, they won't necessarily have sound checks for every artist, so they got to mix on the fly.
Ooh.
And when I looked into doing it, and it's just, it doesn't work for me. I'm not happy with working under that kind of pressure.
Yeah, I get that.
Going into the studio and having 6 hours to set up,
yeah,
and being able to really tailor the sound and get it the way I want it, that's more the type of approach to audio that I like. So that's why I ended up focusing on studio work. There are plenty of engineers that do both live audio and studio audio.
Wow.
But for me, I'm at home in the studio, and I'd much rather, especially at Vera, as we're trying to promote youth empowerment. Like,
I love that. Oh.
I didn't want to just like jump in and start running audio at shows and taking up that space when I could leave it open for someone who's really passionate about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely. When you know your niche, you know it.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of genres do you like recording?
Anything with a drum kit, so I can put up a bunch of microphones.
Yeah, I love that answer.
I love this conversation already.
It's not too late, Lillian. You can become a drummer too.
I have sat at a drum kit maybe 3 times in my life, and I'm not up to the point where I can do a tom fill, but if I really concentrate, I can do a basic beat, which is actually I'm comfortable with that. If I need to sit down, I can
That's
kind of
all you
do-
really need. Is
Yeah, you're already
count
there.
4 and a boom and a tap and some chicka chickas in there.
Yeah. I found it's useful to know how to tune a drum kit, so I can do that. But
Oh,
Yes, that's an
it
important
takes a while, but
It does. And yeah, and it depends on the sound that that drummer wants too.
mhm. I mean, it's super useful, especially because, like, when you're recording multiple songs, ideally you would tune your toms, but in particular, but the snare and the kick as well, to be in the key of the song. So, depending on how much time I'm taking between songs, hopefully the drummer
girl, that's
is.
way more efficient than I would have ever imagined to tune. Like, I don't even know what key my drum kit is in, honestly. I don't know. I go
I
by
don't think
numbers.
I tune it to sound very much classic rock, Led Zeppelin,
Mhm.
Black Sabbath. I like that tone. I
Yeah.
don't know what key
Yeah,
it is.
but what key is that?
I don't know.
Um,
I'm just talking about my
See,
sound.
like,
well, what I found works is you ask the guitarist what key the song is in, and then
Usually
you
in similar keys.
make sure that the toms are tuned to really any note in that scale,
Okay.
because you want to avoid dissonance that'll happen if, like, for example, like the guitarist is playing a chord and your tom is tuned a half step above that. That minor second is going to be really dissonant. And so if you are playing with something that is in the actual key, then it's going to fit a lot better with the song. Depending on like how dead you want your toms to be, it's not necessarily going to matter.
Okay.
But if you really want like that big studio professional sheen, that's one of the tricks you can do. And
That's really good to know. That's a helpful tip right there.
I wish I would have known this like so many
it's
times when I was going into the damn studio to record.
Yeah, it's one of the many little tricks that you can do, and because the engineer has a lot of editing to do between takes, I've found that it's like, all right, I'm going to be busy for 30 minutes. Go tune your toms.
Good idea.
Mhm.
Time well spent.
Yeah, and if you have time, tune the kick as well. When it gets to like the snare, go for tone. Like you could, if you really want to dial it in, especially if it's really ringy, then you also want to tune it to the key of the song.
Okay.
When it comes to the kick, it's because of the way those low frequencies act, it's one of those things that like it definitely can matter, but it also doesn't necessarily matter.
Okay.
But I found the toms are a good way to start, especially because of how musical they can be.
Yeah, they're very distinct sounds that the toms put out. Yeah, that makes sense. And now it makes sense to me too why sometimes in certain recordings you can really hear one of the drums, like specifically the snare. I'll hear in a couple of our recordings and I'm like, "Ooh, bring that down, bring that down." But it might be the tuning, not the volume.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because my body's sensitive to my instrument.
So Angie wants to know. She said, this might sound dumb, but if everything is digital, what do the boards in the studio hook up to?
Well, Angie, there are no dumb questions.
Right. Agreed. There are no dumb questions here. Cheers to that.
So when it comes to home recording, you typically have your interface, the piece of equipment that hooks up to your computer, it'll be able to have microphones plugged into it. And the way that works is that it has circuitry that are known as preamps, which turn up the level of the microphone to make it give it a usable signal, because microphone levels are really quiet.
Huh.
Mixing boards also have preamps on them. And when you scale up to sort of a studio level where you have 32 inputs, you're not going to have the interface that communicates with the computer isn't going to have preamps on it. It's just going to want what is known as line level. And so that's when you have the mixing board, because then you have 24 or 32 channels. They all have preamps. They all have EQs if you want to process the sound going in. You can listen back and get a decent mix going. And I think most importantly, you can create a headphone mix for your artists to perform along to. So it's one of those things that, like, mixing boards are super useful in a studio when you're working at that scale, but really not necessary when you are doing home recording and doing like one musician at a time and aren't necessarily working with more than 8 microphones at once. I hope that answers the question. Or that makes sense.
I think so.
It made sense to me.
Yeah.
think. No, that does. For just people just starting out, what board do you recommend?
I don't recommend a board at all. I recommend getting an 8-channel interface and then enough mics, stands, and cables to set that up. I mean, technically, you just need one microphone. One of my artists does his own recording, still only uses one microphone, and he creates really intricate, amazing soundscapes just by recording a bunch of stuff and layering everything together.
Oh, okay.
I'm not necessarily a fan of like mono drum recording, though you can get really good drum sounds with mono. And if you look back to like really early recordings, they were all mono because they were working with 4 tracks. So there's no, like, I would say like the bare minimum, you get like the cheapest interface you can get, which can have 1 or 2 inputs, and you get a microphone and you just put it in front of things and start recording and layering it together with your preferred piece of software. If you want to scale up a little bit, I would suggest going with one of the 8-channel interfaces that you can get for around $500, and then get the necessary microphones, cables, and stands. And with 8 channels, you can get a decent like drum mic setup.
Huh.
It's not as many microphones as I like to put up, but you
have the ultimate setup for drummers. I will
go
through it. They're all useful, but when you're working with 8, that's your kick, your snare, 2 overheads, and then you have enough for 3 toms and a spare, and like 1 room microphone. And that's more than, well, that's like about what you'd have in like a live environment, and it covers everything that you'd need to be covered. Beyond that, when it comes to like my particular style of studio recording, it's focusing on like the individual elements. So like if you think of it in terms of a snare drum, I'll put a microphone on the bottom of the snare drum in addition to the top, because the top microphone gets the crack of the stick and the overall tone of the drum. The bottom microphone gets that resonant head, which is often tuned differently from the top head, as well as the sound of the snares, so that I get individual control with the different microphone levels over that balance, as opposed to trying to use EQ to change things around. If, for example,
So you already answered like the question because I was going to ask why mic both the top and bottom of the snare, but you already answered that question, and that makes complete sense.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, like,
So our
if
friend
you
Kelly Ray, he is asking, what interface do you recommend?
I use Focusrite interfaces. They're sort of like the intro level interfaces, but they're really excellent as far as the sound that they have. So you can get, and they have a whole bunch of different options available, from a basic 2-channel input, 2-channel output, to their like main rack mountable like 18i20, or even scaling up to like their more premium brand ones. Honestly, it doesn't matter that much. There are differences in like sound, definitely, but all of these companies are really focused on giving you as transparent a sound as possible. So, while if you do a side-by-side comparison, it's going to be a difference. There's not necessarily one that's better, at least as far as like the intro price points go. Obviously, there are more premium options that can get up there in cost, which will have better converters and better preamps in them. But I haven't run into a position where I thought, wow, if only I had a better interface, this would sound better. To me, it's more about like microphones. I love microphones.
I was going to ask what microphones you use. Like, what's the brand?
Ideally, you want to blend because every microphone sounds different.
Okay.
And there are different microphones for different applications. You will never go wrong with the Shure SM57.
Nice. I have some.
I like Audio Technica's condensers as far as like a general all-purpose one. I'm actually talking into an AT4040 at the moment.
That's cool.
There are a lot of beautiful sounding clones of like the really high-end microphones that are super fun to play around with. But what matters more than like brand is variety, because every microphone's going to sound different. Every microphone's going to have a different different frequency response, different transient response, different applications that they're suited for. And it's really a blend of using those microphones, the color that they provide that produces the sound that you want. Like, I would never want to work a session where I only had one microphone, even if that microphone was an SM57, because you absolutely could record a session with just SM57s. But the variety allows me to tailor my microphone choice to the sound that I'm getting out of the individual instrument.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about like, is it a dynamic microphone or a ribbon or a small diaphragm condenser or a large diaphragm condenser, than it is about like the manufacturer. And even within those different categories of microphones, each model is going to have a different frequency response and sound different and be suited for different applications. And then engineers are going to disagree as to whether or not something sounds, quote unquote, good, or whether it works on one thing or doesn't. And everything is so dependent on the actual instrument that you're recording, because that, even more than the microphone, is going to determine the sound that you get. So, like, I'll find myself swapping out microphones, even though, like, I'm used to something sounding good on a particular thing, because the actual instrument that I'm recording doesn't necessarily work with the microphone that I'd normally go for. Which is more of a big studio, a bunch of options answer. If we're focusing more on DIY recording, it depends on what you're after, but
Okay.
like for a guitar, you're not going to go wrong with a 57. Snare drum is a 57. There's a variety of decent cheap kick microphones. A D112 is good, though if you put it too far into the kick drum, it can sound like a basketball. I like a Beta 52 positioned just inside of the sound hole. That sounds good. But really, like it's easy to get hung up on like the specifics.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, it can be.
And everything when it comes to tone, the most important bits start at the beginning of the signal chain. So how is the song written? That's going to affect the tone. How do you perform the song? That's going to affect the tone.
Yeah.
What instrument are you using? That's going to affect the tone. And that's going to affect it much more than which microphone you're using or which preamp you're using or EQ or compressor. So, I mean, if you're looking for like what to buy for a DIY setup, start with the basics. Shure SM57, Shure SM58, a Beta 52, a D112. Audix makes some good drum microphones. 421s if you can afford it, though that's starting to get more on like the mid-priced range. All of these companies have really good like intro level microphones. Like I have a pair of AKG P420s, which were 180 each, and they sound excellent. And I use them on almost every project. And compared to like AKG's flagship 414s, which are $1,000 each, like that is a significant savings. And I never listen to them and say, wow, if only I'd used 414s. It's usually because I'm already using 414s on something else. But like we're at the point now where unless you're going for like something that costs $20, there aren't really any bad microphones.
Oh, okay.
It's more about the variety, listening to everything sounds on different elements, and then being intentional about what you choose to use for any particular thing that you're recording.
What are your recommendations for recording vocals?
Usually with vocals, you record with a large diaphragm condenser microphone. That gives a really clear picture of the sound. Like I'm using one right now. And while like the streaming, streaming is gonna like really lower the quality of the signal, you'll probably be able to hear that there's a lot more definition in what I'm saying than if I were going over like a laptop microphone, which I believe those are like they're really cheap, probably like lav condensers. So they still have like a similar they're still condensers versus dynamic microphones, but they'll definitely have a different sound. For vocals, you'll never go wrong with an SM58. That's the vocal microphone that you perform into. It's designed for vocals, And if you are going for a sound that really mimics what you'd get in a live environment, it's always a good idea to use the microphone that you'd use in a live environment.
Oh, okay.
It's really comes down to, like, there's some microphones that aren't necessarily good for vocals, but it comes down to the individual performer and their voice.
Okay. And do they usually bring their own microphone, or do you prefer to use your studio mics?
I like using studio mics, and depending on like the session, I'll actually do a mic shootout where I'll set up a few microphones and
Oh, okay.
sing a line into every microphone, and then I'll record it, and then I'll work with the singer and say, okay, let's choose the one where you sound the best.
That sounds fun. I like that.
It is.
I like that.
I don't do too many microphones. I think 3 is a really good number.
Yeah.
I'll throw up a 58. I'll throw up, if I have it, a 7B, which is a really commonly used broadcast microphone, but also used a lot for vocals. And then I'll throw up a condenser microphone and have the singer go through each one, make sure that the gain is matched, because if something is louder, our brains will tell us it sounds better. And then we'll have a discussion as to what sounds best, and then we'll go with what we decide upon. And sometimes it is the 58 because it sounds great. And especially if we're going for a more live sound, then we want to use the same microphones that they'd use in a live environment. But if we're going for a more hi-fi studio produced sound, then we're going to go for a large diaphragm condenser.
Oh, okay. Do you always put reverb on the vocals, or not always?
Yes, but I don't necessarily make it audible.
Gotcha.
I'm all about really subtle reverb, because extra dry vocals are going to me, they're noticeable. And if they're noticeable to me, they're noticeable to the listener, even if they can't pinpoint what's up with them. So adding a little bit of space to it kind of softens the edges and brings it to the point where I'm happy with the sound, but I'm not necessarily going to give it some like super like wet, drippy, extended reverb unless that's the style of the music that I'm going
Yeah,
for.
unless that's what the style calls for. The particular artist, I get that.
I like using delays a lot too. Again, not so that it's got like this really like slappy echo, unless that's the style that we're after.
Okay.
But it does help to add space, and can do so in a way that doesn't smudge the sound as much as reverb would.
Oh, okay. Okay. I get you there. Well, sweet.
I have another question.
Man, I'm so excited for Crash. Like she's learning more of the sound engineering than I am. Like I said, I watched my husband do it. I have input. I know a little bit, not a lot, but I've been supportive of Crash in this journey. So go ahead. You said you had a question, Crash.
Well, have you ever recorded onto vinyl, and what's that process like?
So, when it comes to vinyl, that's a separate type of mastering where you take the master and then physically cut a master for the vinyl pressing. And it actually involves manually adjusting EQ settings, because as you get closer to the center of the vinyl, you lose a lot of sound definition. So your vinyl mastering engineer actually has to adjust for that, and doing so live as the music plays. So if you want to do a vinyl master, you need to actually find an engineer that does vinyl mastering, but that happens
Okay.
way after the process. And then there's stuff with like the low end needing to be in mono because otherwise the needle will jump out of the groove.
Huh.
But that's
I did not
way
know it.
of expertise.
That's interesting. I would have never even thought of that.
Mhm.
I love listening to vinyl, but it makes sense that it would be someone that would do that as a specialty. It makes me think of our friends in Erudition. They are going to a specific studio for vinyl recording, and now it makes sense to me why they're doing that.
Mhm.
Sweet.
Right, yeah. No, I read that today, actually.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm like, ooh,
Wait,
I want to buy available after November 14th. How many artists have you worked with?
Oh, I have no idea.
That's awesome. That means you got good business.
Not as much as I'd like, but more than I realize, I think.
Yeah, right. And how many years did you say you were doing this? You probably told me that in the beginning, but
I started school in 2014.
okay, yeah. So kind of fresh, you know?
Yeah.
I love that. Several years at least. Cool.
Mhm.
How long have you had this studio?
Like 4 or 5 years. I've been working
Nice.
at Avera.
That's cool. I love that.
that's awesome.
Yeah. And do you collaborate with other producers? You mentioned that you have some other lessons and that you do teach classes. Do you work with others that help you do that?
I generally do my own production and engineering. I do work with other engineers, bringing them on as assistants because there's a lot that goes into uh, a recording process. So it's useful to have other people there to help, especially with the technical details that can get complicated once you're dealing with all of these different elements. And I call it an open secret of the industry is that nothing ever works. So there's a lot of frantic troubleshooting that goes on when the artists are sitting there on their phones paying money for you to figure out how to get things to work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We have another question for you, Angie.
Angie. Yeah, she said, what is your favorite part of mixing?
All of it. It's my favorite part of recording. As I said, I get to paint with sound, and it's really helps everything come together. To me, like the recording process is the artist's opportunity to be creative. The mixing is my opportunity to be creative. And so I get to play around with different ideas and do things that are way too extreme for what I actually do in the final product. But I get to explore and really see where the audio takes me. And ultimately come up with something that's elevated from just the raw recording that we got.
I like that when you said that you like to see where the audio takes you, because I've seen some sound engineers and they just get lost in what they're doing because they're just having so much fun just doing what they do.
Well, there's a lot of passion that goes into it. I love the metaphor of painting with sound.
I did too.
Yeah, I really like that. What music do you listen to? Who do you listen to, Lillian?
I listen to 70s dad rock.
Nice. I freaking love that, dude.
It, it was right.
70s dad rock. I love that.
I mean, you grow up with a certain era of music, it kind of just sticks with you.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Yeah.
But I enjoy all types of music. It's just a matter of sort of like falling into it and being able to appreciate what makes it musical. And I try and push myself to explore different genres and different styles and different eras. Because having that holistic understanding and that holistic experience really, I feel, helps me be a more well-rounded person in general, but also helps me in my career in understanding like the different approaches to making music and to what sounds good to the people making it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it makes you more versatile too.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Pacific Northwest, we have all sorts of genres too, like jazz. We have Celtic folk rock, like you mentioned, metal, punk. Have all of these genres come true? What was that, Crash?
It said mariachi bands.
Mariachi bands.
Those guys are crazy. I love them.
Oh man, I love watching them. Yes, crazy fast on the keys.
Mm-hmm.
Strings. Sorry. Let me see. I'm usually used to, interviewing musicians specifically. You are more of a sound engineer, but you do have a little bit of a musical background.
Right.
I'm pushing for you to be a drummer because, well, I love playing the drums. But Crash, did you have any more questions about the recording process itself?
No, those were the only questions I really had.
Okay. Are you affiliated with
I was
any
waiting
other?
to see if Angie has any more questions.
Yeah, the chat room has been definitely intrigued with your work. And I know that they're jotting down notes because we are part of a community of women that are
Right,
in.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yes, please do. Tell us a little bit about that, Crash.
So, Angie and I started a group called Women in Audio in Seattle. And we have beginning lessons for recording. So, definitely check that out. I know I've been checking it out.
So you guys have lessons through the group?
Yes.
Angie said, yes, we're taking notes.
We're taking notes.
I figured. Well, and I've definitely been inspired because I was invited into the group to learn more about the process too, because it is a labor of love that my husband does. And I appreciate that he wants my say in it, but to learn some of the technical aspects of it would make me a well-rounded artist myself. Pro Tools, yes. Chat room says Pro Tools coming.
Pro Tools coming, mixing classes by professionals.
Love Pro Tools.
There we go.
Thank you. Well, and Lillian, you're part of the group, right? I've seen. Yeah, I thought I saw you part of that. That's awesome. I love that.
We have all the good ones.
We have all the great connections. Yes. Sorry, I had a glitch. I kind of look like Sometimes I get so comfortable hanging out, I forget I'm live.
Yeah.
And Miss Bats forgets that too. You could probably hear her yelling earlier.
Oh my gosh, she's been yelling.
I had to unmic myself. I'm like, holy cow, my cat is really into this, I guess. Oh, we got another question.
No. Oh, yeah.
Bada bing.
What do you think is a benefit to learning recording as a musician?
Well, when it comes to recording yourself, you're able to really have that instantaneous like listen back of what you're doing, to be able to hear how you're playing, hear the songs that you're coming up with, and have that additional layer of experimentation and personal critique that can really help you as you perfect your craft and revise your songs, and even get yourself to the point where you're ready to go into a studio to have the material to give to your producer. As far as like, if you want to go that studio route, that it can actually help you better understand what goes into recording, and better prepare yourself for going into the studio. So I think it's actually really beneficial for all musicians to have a basic understanding of the recording process and what goes into actually making music. It's definitely liberating because it allows musicians to really take ownership of their creative process, but it also enables you to have the knowledge you need to get the most out of whatever approach to recording you take, whether that is, DIY in your basement or in a fancy studio with a producer and an engineer. Or a regular studio with a producer and engineer.
Yeah.
So
are you affiliated with... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, if you are doing like an at-home recording session, do you take the amps out of the room and put them in separate rooms?
Yeah. I want everything with as much isolation as possible. Because when it comes to... Yeah. When it comes to mixing, we want as much control as we have. And so limiting the amount of bleed from other sources is really important. When it comes to like amps, you're probably not going to have much to worry about with drums going into the amps, because your microphone's going to be placed up against the speaker. But you're going to have a lot of amp sound in the drum microphones, and so you're going to be limited in the amount of balance and the amount of control that you can get over that. So that's why you will try and have everything isolated. So you have your drums in one room, your amps in another room, your vocalists in even another room, and record that way. Though oftentimes you'll end up doing each instrument individually, especially for home recording where you're not necessarily able to set up the number of microphones that you would be able to in a studio. So that way you will have like, that'll serve mixing because you'll have the necessary isolation at the cost of having to record each instrument individually. So it's always like this give or take. Ideally, you'd be in a situation where you'd record all the artists playing together to get that feel of a band playing together.
Like a scratch track.
Exactly. And then you'd decide whether or not you'd re-record the other instruments on top, or if you'd keep everything based on the level of isolation that you got and the level of performances that you got. But it really depends on like your needs as a musician and the equipment you have available and the space you have available.
Right. Right. The space is going to be limited because,
It is, yeah, it's
home
challenging.
recording,
Yeah.
which has its own challenges, home recording.
It does. Oh, it does. Yeah.
Because we don't have isolation booths.
Right. Sometimes the isolation booth is the bathroom.
Yeah.
And
We haven't used it for like a scratch track on something, but like my husband's former band did some of the vocals in a bathroom. Sounded kind of cool too.
Yeah, I mean, bathrooms can have great reverbs.
Yeah, they really do. I know I like the bathroom.
Yeah, on a project.
That's where my singing is always the best.
No, yeah, I used my bathroom as a reverb on a project. I actually set up a speaker in it and a microphone and ran vocals from my computer into the bathroom and recorded the sound that it produced in it. It was pretty cool.
That is cool.
And speaking of that, Angie is asking, what are some of the weirdest sounds that you've ever played with during a mix?
Ooh.
And we were just talking about the pagan folk band that you recorded out in the woods.
Yeah. I don't know about weird sounds. Definitely weird spaces. The woods do have like their own ambience and echo to them. I'd say that project, on the property we were at, there was a rusted out oil drum that sounded really cool. So I actually had the band around the drum and they were just all drumming on it in time with the music. So that produced a weird, interesting sound.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear that. That sounds really cool.
Oh, I know.
Yes.
So like no goats that you've gone and recorded a goat bleeding. And
no,
this is where a goat sound needs to be, right?
I haven't done any animal sacrifices.
You never know, you know.
No, I don't think I'd be up for that extreme of a recording project.
Yeah.
But fair enough.
Yeah, it would be weird.
That could be good, crazy. Like you're just bringing goats into your studio. Making them and everything.
Yeah. On this latest
there goes your microphone condom.
Yeah. On this latest project, we did dancing bells. So
I love that.
And
that would be so cool.
I've actually done that twice. Once, this latest one, I had the microphones close to the ground, and the other one, I had the microphones up like drum overheads. And I think I liked the close to the ground ones better. It's at least closer to where the bells are. And the performer was also playing tambourine and had like rattles as she was dancing. And so those were picked up in the microphones, but also more indirect.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like as she's moving around, that I'm getting like this stereo image of it where I actually get the sense of her moving in the space.
Oh, that's cool. Beautiful.
That is cool.
That would be really cool sound to capture. Yeah, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the odd spaces you've recorded. So you said the woods. Where else have you had
most of my work has been at Vera, but at Vera we have a wheelchair elevator that's basically a 15-foot aluminum shaft with an open top.
Okay.
So I'll actually dangle a microphone down into it to get the sound of the drums in particular being played in the room above.
Whoa.
It sounds really cool.
That would be really cool.
That's badass. right
Talk
there.
about working with what you got. That is so cool.
is really
Yeah, not all studios have
ingenuity
that.
right there. Best.
It adds this really interesting ping to the snare drum.
I bet.
The construction of the elevator shaft is like the proper dimensions to really capture the frequencies of the snare drum. So it's actually become like a staple of the sound I get out of the space.
Sweet.
And I'm like, well, all of these, like the close mics and the overheads and the traditional room mic, that's all cool. But this elevator sounds like nothing anybody else has. So I'm going to add that in. And when it comes to room mics like that, you need to think of the sound of the drum as being like a progression. So it starts by hitting the close microphones, and then 3 milliseconds later, it hits the overhead. And then 15 milliseconds after that, it hits the elevator microphone. And then 20 after that, it hits the stair microphone.
Whoa.
And each of these microphones adds its own unique characteristic to the sound as it progresses through the space and over time. And so instead of just like a dull pop that you'd get if you're just using that close microphone, you actually get a more extended
Dynamic.
sound. Exactly. Like you would get if you're standing in a space.
Multi-layered.
Mhm.
I'm very in love with this idea.
Yeah, I like a lot of layers too. You know, we're a two-piece band, but to add a lot to our recording and our sound even live, we have a lot of different layers with looping or with, you know, multiple vocal tracks that are layered on top of each other. Different guitar tracks too.
Yeah, I mean, layering tracks is really a staple of modern sound ever since we were able to move beyond tape into digital, or we had unlimited tracks. Like, really being able to put together those layers and really sculpt things and build without any limitations has opened up a lot of creative avenues for artists.
Did you ever learn to work with analog, or did you go right into digital? Like it wasn't even part of.
Oh my god, you're such a skull pirate. I was just gonna ask you that same question.
We were never taught how to work with tape, but everything before you go onto the computer is analog. And I do know how to do analog mixes.
Okay.
They're really fun until you have to write down every single thing that you did.
Oh.
So that you can meticulously recreate it at a later date. So for me, like, I love analog equipment, but I'm using it going into Pro Tools. So I'll use equalizers while I'm recording, and I'll use compressors while I'm recording. But when it comes to mixing, I like the flexibility of working completely digital.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Do have some analog gear myself, but I try and keep that limited to certain processes.
Okay.
Instead of going full bore and getting a giant mixing board and a giant rack of compressors, it's a lot more restricting to mix analog than you necessarily think it is. And I like the flexibility of mixing digitally. But I'm all about analog processes while I'm recording.
That's awesome.
No, that makes sense. Like, I like cassettes. I really do. I like tapes. But I really think digital is a better way to go.
I think vinyl and tapes are more nostalgic for us, if you know that makes sense.
Because we're old.
Yeah. No.
Well, there's a ritual, especially to vinyl. Like, you take it out of the sleeve, you put it on the record player, you have to turn it over. There's a definite sound to
And
it.
that popping and hissing of the record spinning and the needle, like
there's
can't
just something
get that.
that's what we do. We sit around and we listen to vinyl instead of watching Netflix or Hulu. We just sit around and talk and listen to the vinyl because it's just so, one, nostalgic, and two, it's calming. Yeah.
And I think that's why we're seeing a vinyl boom.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's why. Yeah.
People like the ritual. They like the collection of it.
That's exactly what I love about it, the ritual. I'm really into that. Yeah. Yeah. It's like recentering. So I was going to ask who your idols in the recording world are. Who do you look up to?
Sylvia Massey. She's a female producer known for her work with Tool as well as countless other artists. I really admire her approach to recording. She is all about experimenting, trying new things, doing something weird and different that might sound terrible but might sound cool. And she injects a lot of adventure into it and a lot of danger too. I mean, she shot a piano with a shotgun.
Wow.
For a Tool record. And
you would have to be very experimental to work with a band like Tool.
Right.
Yeah.
Maynard's kind of a weird guy.
I love Tool. Oh my God. I really do.
But yeah, I just love her whole philosophy behind it. It's just try different things, constantly explore, and really push yourself to see where you can bring the audio, because you're probably going to find something that nobody else has found before. I went to a talk that she gave, and big demonstration was running a guitar through a pickle.
Through a what?
A pickle.
What?
What?
So if you get the right salinity in a pickle, it'll conduct electricity.
Dude.
So
real? I love pickles even more now.
So she this was, you have to use like a solid state line amp or else you'll explode your amplifier.
Okay.
But she hooked a speaker cable, two speaker cables attached to a nail into a pickle.
Wow.
And
I'm looking this up now. I want to see this.
They played guitar and the pickle started to glow. What? And it produced this really gnarly distortion. And one of her things is doing it to various things. So she'll run it through like a light bulb or a power drill. And all of that will impart a certain sonic characteristic that you're not going to get with a guitar pedal or an amplifier.
Dude.
When you're searching for something novel that nobody else has, you have to think outside of the box like that.
I do. My mind is blown by that.
Dude, I would have never ever thought of a pickle though. Like,
no, like really, like
it sounds cool. Getting that guitar to run through a pickle.
It does sound pretty cool. No, I haven't gone that extreme, but I like that philosophy of really saying, what can I do that nobody else has done?
Besides the elevator shot.
Yeah, the elevator.
That's pretty.
Like
that's pretty genius.
Not everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really lucky.
Well, and that was inspired by her, just kind of seeing it in the space and saying, I wonder what that sounds like.
What can I use here? Yeah, that's sweet. Oh my gosh.
I've even put vocalists in it, which is really fun.
I bet that is fun to get a whole different sound to the vocals to layer with the other tracks of vocals. Ooh. Oh,
Yeah,
Imagine the reverb.
that would be so cool. I love
it
it.
does give it this like really claustrophobic feel. And just because you can really, it's not as echoey as you'd expect it to be, but you do get a feel for the closeness of the space because it is really like it's designed just for a wheelchair, so
Yeah.
it's not big.
Oh, okay.
Is
Gotcha.
the elevator all the way down on the lower floor when you feed into it, or is it in the middle? Like, where do you stop that elevator at for the sound?
I put the elevator all the way down, but the microphone is hanging in the middle.
Okay.
Oh, so kind of like a drop mic.
Yeah,
That's so
just like
cool.
dangling there.
Oh my goodness.
I kind of want to do this, run this experiment.
I know, I want to see this. Do
I
you
mean,
have video of this on your website?
of the elevator microphone?
Yeah.
No.
Any pictures online?
Yeah, I should have some pictures.
Ooh. I want to see.
I really got to check out this
Yeah.
elevator mic.
Speaking of, where can our viewers find you online? What is your website?
My website is www.lillianblair.com. There is one L in the middle of Lillian because I wasn't thinking of Googleability when I chose my name.
There's what did you say about the Lillian?
Let me just type it out.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can do that.
Well, and Crash is way faster at typing than me.
Okay, got it.
You're awesome. Great friend. Yeah, we want to make sure that our viewers can find you and connect with you because we have a lot of musicians that watch our show because we are musicians Hangout, and they might want to connect with you. So when they are able to come into studio, they can work with you.
That would be wonderful.
What is your projection of when you might start, bringing people back into the studio? Do you have any specific COVID-19 procedures that you would abide by so you can open a little sooner?
Well, most studios are still open. The Vera Project is working on our procedures because our space is owned by Seattle Center and the city of Seattle, so we need to be a little bit more stringent. But I've been working out of Mysterious Red X at the moment, which is currently open, an excellent space.
Nice.
When it comes to sessions now, follow the basic mask wearing, hand washing protocols that we have to follow for everything. I try and set up the musicians so we can maintain social distancing, but a lot of times, musicians are practicing together, so they're sort of in each other's bubble.
Right.
So it's really about just making sure that we're all safe in the way that we know that we need to be safe.
Right.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that because I know that Seattle is sort of a hot spot for it, and I'm just wondering how you guys are working around all of those things so that projects like this, studios like this, don't go away.
Right. I mean, it's really scary, and I think it's going to keep being scary for a long time. I mean, artists can't play shows.
I know, it's devastating.
They can't make money. They can't make money. They can't go to the studio. Everything is so interconnected.
It really
is. I think we're all just still trying to figure out how to hang on.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. It's all been very odd. I saw a meme yesterday that said when we celebrate New Year's on midnight. We never speak of this again. Oh, that was you. That's right. I was like, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Yes. Cheers. And we're done. 2021. Here we go. You know, I wanted to also say that I really respect the fact that you work with youth and you want to inspire youth. I'm a high school teacher and it's one of my passions too. So I just wanted to really give you a shout out for that because I really, really do appreciate others that want to help our youth along their journey, especially within music. Music is such a beautiful part of life. It's nice to foster that at an early age.
Right. And thank you. Yeah, it's really rewarding to be that kind of a role model. I never thought I'd see myself in that position, but to be there and to provide that belief that something like this is possible is really rewarding to me. I remember one instance where we were having an audio committee meeting at Vera, and we had a young girl who was new to our space and just exploring. And afterwards, we were going to have a chance to just kind of play around with the equipment. And I knew that she was new and just looking into things. So I made sure to steer her towards our giant mixing board and basically said, you know, here are your faders that adjust the volume. Here are your EQs that adjust what it sounds like. Go have fun. And just sort of like pushed her into diving into this really cool thing, because when you're in front of a mixing board, it's like, wow, this is big. This is expensive. This has a lot of knobs. Let's see what I can do with it. And she, you know, jumped in and played around and actually got her hands on something. And that to me is like the best experience you can have is just diving into something and seeing this big intimidating thing. And then once you start playing around with it, you realize, oh, I can actually do it. It's not like this big, scary, complicated thing. It's actually something that I can take to. And just to see like the joy in her face as she's realizing that was really rewarding for me.
I love that in students when they have that pure, innocent passion behind it. After that aha, and then like you said, having fun with it.
Yeah.
How old are the kids that you work with? I'm assuming they're adolescent age.
Right. I mean, we cater to like mid to late teens and up. But the students that I've worked with have spanned all ages, from teens to 20s to people older than me. Like,
I'll be one of those people soon enough.
We really are all ages.
What's your largest demographic?
Mostly youth. That's the people that we focus on.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. I love hearing that there are these kids just learning some audio engineering coming out soon.
And getting jobs doing it. That's always important.
That is really important. I wanted to throw this up here too. Angie says that you're an amazing role model.
I think both of you ladies are, honestly. All three of you ladies. That includes you and Miss Angie.
Yeah, the connections we've made through this podcast, oh my goodness, are amazing. You know, like that's so we would find connections mostly through live venues too, but so glad we started this podcast a year ago, because with COVID, you know, we don't have any live venues open. We don't have any live music right now. So this way is a good way to stay connected, build community. Feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are some of your goals for the future?
Continue to make music.
I love that.
Work in bigger, fancier studios.
Oh, yeah. Upgrading yours or working in others'
Working
space?
on others. I've had the chance to work at places like London Bridge and Robert Lang, and that is always a trip to be in those spaces and to see the platinum records on their walls and
Yeah,
realize
I bet that would be, it would be so, oh my goodness. I don't know.
Mhm. it
Invigorating.
is really fun. But like as you said earlier, like those cost a lot of money, and artists aren't necessarily able to put together the budget for that these days.
Oh, yeah, I
Me
know.
included. Um, yeah, just continuing to grow, work with bigger budgets, work with bigger artists, do more diverse projects, push myself as far as the creativity side goes of engineering, and just see what the future has in store.
That's awesome. That's a very good goal.
Which musicians are easier to work with, like the bigger people or the more like local indie rock people?
The musicians who practiced, I think
Yeah,
those are
those are the best ones.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
practice.
Yes. It doesn't matter which level, it matters if
That's
you're
like a perfect answer.
yeah.
I my prescription is 2 hours a day for 2 weeks before going into the studio.
Yeah. That sounds reasonable. Definitely.
You hear that, hater noise?
I'm glad you think that's reasonable because some artists are like, why do we have to do that?
Really?
Because
Oh,
you're
I
spending
practice a lot. I
money.
guess. When I'm getting ready, especially for a really special event or recording.
Yeah, something that you're spending a lot of money on that's going to be
Yeah.
preserved forever.
Oh yeah.
Like, it does take a lot of preparation, especially like, I mean, as you know, like once you're in the moment where you have to get it right, like there's a lot of anxiety that you have to really push through, and unless you are a seasoned musician, it's going to catch up to you. So having that additional preparation is really useful to help you get out of that, or at least keep that anxiety from affecting your performance. I mean,
I get you there. I totally get that because if you come in cold
Mhm.
and you freeze up, time is of the essence because money is time in this
Exactly.
situation, and you don't want to freeze up or mess up too much because, um, you want as much as you're
Wasting
getting out of
money.
that. Yes.
And like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I can do to make you sound better, but you're never, no matter how much I do, you're not going to sound as good as you would if you came in and you nailed the take because
You
you
gotta
were
be solid, man. Yeah. I'm all about that. Be solid. Cool.
So yeah, that's my answer to your question. Musicians who practice. And they're my favorite musicians
It
to work
makes total
I like
sense.
that.
Yes.
That's a perfect question.
Yeah.
That was a perfect question.
And I
Perfect.
make sure
Yes,
that they know
perfect
that
answer.
that's
to that question.
yeah. I make sure that they know that that's what they need to do because it wouldn't be fair for me to just like assume that they are going to practice as much as I think they need to. Like, I have the experience of what it really takes to record at the level they want to record at. So, part of my job is sharing that experience with them and sharing that knowledge with them. So, that's
I like that
part of the
a lot.
part of the conversation, along with like here's what everything costs, and here's the recording process. Here's what to expect. You know, replace your strings, replace your drum heads, change the tuning of your toms in between songs, all that necessary preparation.
That is so helpful to know, by the way. I love knowing
That
that.
is really helpful.
I was going to pop your website up here just for reference. And this is where viewers can go, musicians can go to message you to work with.
Right.
All the contact information's here on www.lillianblair.com. So check her out, man. It sounds like a really cool space. I want to check it out. I want to go as soon as I can. We're
And
coming.
check out the Vera Project.
Definitely.
And put that at the Vera Project, because
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to check out the Vera Project. Everybody knows about the Vera Project.
It's really a wonderful
All the
organization, and
musicians I know.
we're so much more than recording studio, music venue. I mean, we have a screen printing studio so that artists can come in and do their own merch. We have a lot of like community outreach programs that are going on.
Dude, that's good to know.
We are like everybody trying to adapt to COVID, and I think COVID's focus, shifting our focus a lot towards more community outreach, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I love the community building, especially. Very good. If you could record any famous artist, who would you want to record?
Any famous artist?
Any of them. And if there's multiple, go ahead. Like, who do you want to record? Your dream artist.
That is, I'm drawing a blank. I would say Zeppelin would be fun.
Oh yes. Ooh, they would be so fun.
That's just because I really like recording drums.
Right.
Anyone with a solid drummer, I'm going to go for.
That's awesome. I love that. Have you ever recorded more than one drummer? Multiple drummers in a band?
Not at the same time, but I've done percussion overdubs.
Of different drummers themselves, different people.
Right. Like different drums added on top of everything. Multiple drummers would be a really fun project.
Yeah, it would be.
It's I have assisted on sessions that have multiple drummers. I think, or multiple drum kits. There's some interesting stuff I've helped out on.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But yeah, I think from like an engineering standpoint, it really would be like I'd probably end up splitting my 16 microphones. Instead of putting up an additional 16. Probably have them in the same space so that they can like have that visual cue off of each other, and as well as getting like the sound of the space, because my favorite microphones for drums are the room microphones. Just getting the sound of the acoustics as opposed to like the close elements. That's probably what I would focus on, is just the sound of the instruments in the space, rather than like obsessing over the minutia of the individual kit elements.
Gotcha. No, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
A 2-drummer band would be really fun to work with.
Yeah, it would be. I saw a 2-drummer percussionist band at the Moore Theater years ago. I watched the Tedeschi Trucks
Mm-hmm.
So Susan Tedeschi with her husband, and they had 2 drummers. And then at one point during the show, it was almost like they had not a drum off, but like like I don't know, a moment where it was just them and they were drumming to each other and with each other, and it was just amazing. I just loved it. It's been something I've wanted to do for a little while. In fact, we were going to do that at a festival, weren't we, Crash? Like it was
Yes, we were.
requested. It was requested that we were going to do that, and the festival didn't happen or hasn't happened. So eventually, when we do a festival for Musicians Hangout, it could
on my
happen.
phone.
It's very, very likely because fans have
It would be
requested.
cool
Like,
if we
want to drum
like,
together.
wrote a song together. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like drum together. That'd be cool.
yes, it would be so fun. We could switch drums too because I know your kit so well. Like I've helped you take it down and put it up. I don't think I've ever played it, but I know it.
You really should.
I'm
There's
like
a
her
monster
drum
by
tech.
Love, I think. It sounds so good.
I have a tiny
Well, because
little
we
like,
have a few minutes left, so if anybody has any additional questions that you would like to ask Lillian real quick. I know all my questions that I had were pretty answered tonight. I'm really looking forward to all sorts of cool things, playing with stuff.
well, and I have
Like
total
a-
confidence, friend. When you set out to do something, you do it. So I know you're gonna rock it. You're gonna rock it. And I so appreciated some of the information too, because I'm part of our recording project, and knowing, even little tweaks about tuning my drums to the key of the guitar. I mean, that makes sense, but it's something that you don't really think about if you're not, you haven't been educated in sound engineering.
And even like microphone placement. Like, don't stick that microphone way into the kick because you're just gonna get this super gross sound. Like, barely have it in there.
Yeah, we've had to learn that by trial and error. Yeah. So Lillian, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely.
Well, and stay connected, definitely. We want to, help you promote yourself and maybe get you connected with some of the artists that we have networked with.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm totally going to the Build Project.
Heck
Taking
yeah.
some damn classes.
That should be a
now.
little field trip for Musicians Hangout, I'd say.
Heck yeah, that's happening. Once COVID is over.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's
downtown
caveat for everything.
So,
sorry, my cat's freaking out now. Storms always freak out my animals. But we made it through, guys, without losing connection.
Yay. Well, thanks again, Lillian, for taking the time to sit down with us ladies and tell us your story and how you make your magic happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for
and
having
hopefully
me.
I'll be meeting you in person soon once COVID's over.
That would be so ideal. Totally. I want to meet you too. And keep painting with sound, Lillian.
I will. And thank you all for having me.
Thinking outside that box.
Mm-hmm.
I am interested in this pickle thing.
Oh yeah, me too.
It sounds dangerous.
Didn't find it. I'm going to find it. Go pickles.
All right, kids. Well, that's it for this Musicians Hangout.
I'll take us out. All right. Don't forget to tune in next week. Good night, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Night. Happy Wednesday.